Tragedy and Truth-Telling, The Red Sari and Other Stories. The guests will be on stage in just a moment. They have confirmed that they will do a signing after the session. So as usual, we'll require you to go to the bookshop first and then to the signing area. The signing area is the blue and white box-like unit over there in the far left corner. That's where you can have your signings done after the session. Just a little housekeeping. Please put your mobile phones on silent, and please don't do any flash photography during the session. There's no smoking allowed in this venue. We will need to keep the central aisle clear, and please look out for your belongings. We can't take responsibility for those. So look out for those between sessions. And finally, this venue, which we love so much, is actually a family home, and we'd very much like to keep it clean, so please don't litter, and do put your rubbish in the bins provided. Now, please join me in welcoming on the stage Javier Moro, Florence Noiville, and Madhu Trehan. Thank you.
Should we start? Welcome. We have with us today Florence Noiville, who is a journalist with Le Monde, but she has also written some really important books. One of them is Literary Miniatures, which are interviews with people from politicians and other people, writers from all over the world. The book that we're going to be talking about is called Attachment, a very delicate, sensitively written book, extremely subtle and more nuanced than anything graphic. That's what appealed to me the most. Javier has written a very controversial book called The Red Sari about Sonia Gandhi's life, her biography. He was not able to publish it while the UPA government was in power, so it has just been published now for good reason. He's safe, which tells us a lot about India's self-censorship mode that we are on, journalists as well as writers, a subject that I'm sure will come up in our conversation. We start with you, Javier. Could you tell us why you thought of writing this story, more than anything else?
We're talking about Bhopal or Sonia?
No, Sonia.
Okay. Oh, what?
Javier also wrote a book on the Bhopal disaster. Right.
No, well, I thought to write about Sonia because nobody had written about her, because there was a hole there, because apart from some political pamphlets published in India, in the West there was absolutely nothing on her. I remember going to Rome's major bookstore once and asked for a book on Sonia Gandhi and said it doesn't exist. So now there's one, this is mine. And when I started doing the research, I understood immediately why there was no books on Sonia Gandhi. You know, she has tried to discourage every single Italian journalist or Italian writer, or even Tina Brown, who was you know, the editor-in-chief of New Yorker magazine. Everybody who had been as fascinated as I've been myself with her story and the story of the family, everybody that had tried to approach her, she just had, you know, convinced them not to go ahead. She's a very private person, as they say. She's very shy. She hates to be talked about. She hates to be written about. But on the other hand, you know, she can't escape being a public figure. And as a public figure, you know, one is allowed to accept, you have to accept scrutiny. And that's why I was never in doubt that what I was doing was perfectly licit, comment on dit en anglais?
Licit?
Licit, you know?
Or perfectly
permitted? Permitted.
How do you say that word?
Licit,
right, it was
permitted,
right.
free?
Yeah, no, permitted, and even, you know, it was The opposite of illicit.
So you knew when you started it would be a struggle to...
I knew.
To get...
of course.
Inside information.
Yeah, she had discouraged every single one who had approached her. Why would she, you know, accept an obscure Spanish guy who wanted to write her story?
You have approached her story very much as a love story. Her love story with Rajiv Gandhi.
It's not I approach the story as a love story. It's that she really fell in love with Rajiv Gandhi.
Okay, so
I mean,
it's an area where I would venture to say that we Indians, especially journalists, have not really seen or addressed that side of her. We have addressed her as the daughter-in-law of a prime minister who ran the household behind the scenes. We've addressed her as the wife of Rajiv Gandhi, prime minister and politician. And then we've addressed her as a politician, as the president of the Congress party, extremely powerful, pulling all the strings that she wanted to behind the scenes, actually without any accountability because she did not hold any ministerial post. So your story really addresses her childhood, her growing up in rural, sort of a small town area, and then going to London to learn English, to Cambridge rather, to learn English, and then falling in love with Rajiv, and then everything was. So now I think this is why both of you are on this panel together, because Florence's book that I read last night is about love, and a rather strange love, and a love which is in some way forbidden. So I will ask you in a minute, but would you say that a large part of Sonia's relationship with Rajiv became more exciting, as Florence has written in a book, because it was in some way forbidden by her family?
Well, at the beginning it may have happened, but I don't really think that it was just a whim for her when she boarded a plane from Milano when she was barely 20 years old. I think she was 18 or 19. She had promised her father she would come back, knowing perfectly well that she would not going to come back. She would stay in India with Rajiv. I mean, you have to see that from the point of view of 1968. From an Italian girl, 1968, to do that revealed a sheer determination, or what you can say also, a deep love for her husband-to-be, because you don't do that if you're not, you know, fully convinced. So she did that and then stayed in India. For me, it was extremely interesting to, I wanted always the personal thing, you know, literature is the personal thing, the detail. I mean, I didn't want to write a history book. I didn't want to write a book on politics. You have plenty of that stuff there. But I wanted to know, you know, how she felt when she was forced to learn Hindi, how she felt when she had to adapt to a completely different culture in those days, which was really different, you know, how she felt when she was confronted with the big tragedies of her life and had to make such difficult choices, choices that were going against her own nature, because she has always been a woman, you know, that was opposed to politics, that was afraid of politics. I mean, Indira had died in her arms. Rajiv was killed in a very terrible manner. And I was very intrigued by the transformation a woman can undergo from becoming a housewife, hating politics and despising power, to being a politician rising to the position of being the most powerful person. And I'm not talking about a small country like the Republic of San Marino. If somebody is here from the Republic of San Marino, I hope it's not going to be, you know, meant by it. But from India, I mean, more than 1 billion people. A person that was born and bred in Italy for 20 years ends up being, against herself, the most powerful person in a country of 1 billion people. That is interesting, no matter what. No matter if you like it or you don't like it. I mean, it's independently of your political flavor or whatever. That is from the point of view of a writer, very, 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 very good dramatic stuff that I never intend to let it pass.
I'd like to bring Florence in. Florence, your story, Attachment, is about a young girl who's a student, 18 years old, who has an affair, a relationship, falls in love with her professor, who is 50 years old. And of course her family reacts, and even her sister disapproves or is cut out of her life, sort of. Do you think the element of forbidden love is an essential agreement, thank you, essential ingredient for making that relationship more exciting?
It is definitely. Can you hear me? Yes. Actually, I think what Javier's book and mine have in common is this. They've pretty much focused on very strong women. Women who suddenly fall in love, possibly with someone who was not meant to be the right man. I remember in the case of Sonia, when reading your book, the father says, but she doesn't know what she's doing and she'll never adapt to India, things like this. But she, like my protagonist, who is called Marie, they pretty much want to have it their own way. So they're very strong, and they are ready to really struggle to go to undergo this relationship to what it, you know. And when Javier said I wanted to know how it feels for Sonia to experience this, it's exactly the same for me. I wanted to know how it feels for a young woman to fall in love, madly in love with a much older man. So I thought, let's think, there's Nabokov and Lolita, so I should read this again. But this was written from the point of view of the man. So I thought, okay, I'm going to rewrite it from the point of view of the young girl. That's what I did. And I also wanted to bring something new in the story, because otherwise, you know, if you write fiction, if you write like a romance or a love story, if you write it like it would have been in the 19th century, what's the point? So the other element new that I wanted to bring into this story was the scientific side of it. What's happening in her brains when she falls in love, when you get attached or when you get detached? What is at stake? Because, you know, it's really interesting that, and I think writers do not tackle this enough.
The biological changes of
yes.
endorphins being released and the oxytocin and the feel-good factor, which sort of in many Greek mythology, in fact even in Hindu mythology, has been described where karma hits and you're gone.
That's it.
Now, the other element which was very interesting in your book was that you bring the daughter in. The daughter also brings her version of how she perceives her mother. And I think that is part of a growing up, when a young girl becomes a young adult and begins to see parents as fallible, having made mistakes, gone through transgressions, broken the social norms. And I think that is a very interesting part of the book, when the girl looks for filling up the clues, goes after the clues, and then meets a friend of the father's. And I think the nuance of how you describe their meeting is extremely suggestive, but doesn't go all the way. One of the things I wanted to ask you about was when her father is dying, he says, it is not proof of good health to be integrated into a sick society. So what are your feelings about that? I mean, you wrote that for a reason.
My feeling is that she very much wants to break a taboo, not for breaking the taboo itself, but just to show that in this case, she's a very young woman, really sincerely, madly in love with an older man, and it should be acceptable, whereas obviously society is rejecting her and rejecting everything. Why not tell this story? Why not write about it? Exactly like in my previous novel, I was tackling the bipolar disease subject, And these are subjects that are not at all tackled, even in the West, where we think we're very liberated, and you know, there are all these debates about, I don't know, gay marriage, etc. But when it comes to this particular form of a relationship, which is a bit weird, we think, how come she must be interested in his money, or there must be something. But if it's just love, it becomes really obscene. That's,
yes.
I found
so
interesting.
The similarities, I would suggest, in desperation, the similarities I would suggest is that here your Marie is rebelling against bourgeois norms, and the mother is telling her things like, what is your future, there's nothing in it. She's looking at it as you compare it to an economic thing, an investment, you're wasting your time. In the same way, Sonia's father was extremely negative about India, Indians, Rajiv Gandhi. He didn't think it would ever last, so he asked her to wait a year, and they did wait a year, but even then she went doggedly on. And then even when she went to India, he was sure that she was going into a land of, Mr. Maino was sure that she was going into a land of savages.
He didn't show up for her marriage.
Yes.
I mean, the whole family came, an uncle came from Italy, the mother came, a sister came, but yeah. The father didn't want to come. He was opposed to it from day one.
Was it because you think about, because he was staunchly Catholic?
No. I don't think it was a religious thing. I think that this man was a man from the mountains, not a very sophisticated man, and from him marrying to an Indian, it was like marrying to a Martian, somebody from outer space. It was something that could probably never have worked, and he never believed in it. And after a few years, yes, he started to see that was real. And he was also not only against the cultural differences, he was also against the fact that she was marrying into that family, because he was afraid, He knew enough that people in high positions of power, are subject to certain risks. And all those risks was the ones he would have preferred his daughter to avoid, I mean, for him it was a no from the beginning. And then, well, of course, you mellow, you change in life. And drama is about change. It's about how people change, how people adapt, how people become different between the beginning of the story and the end of the story. And that is what I really focus more about, How come this woman who could not say anything in public, who would refuse her husband's plea to come for a quick interview that TV5, the French television, did when he was prime minister, she said, no, I'm not going to go there. She was absolutely allergic.
Yes, I remember one time when he was in New York on a trip, and she was with him, and they went to a public meeting, and the crowd pleaded with her to say a few words, and
she wouldn't.
She said, Jai Hind.
Yeah.
I think that was...
And imagine, and so for me the mystery was, how come this woman ultimately makes speeches in parliament, like the one she did in 2013, for example, which is something outstanding. It was an outstanding speech.
Do you think she took the dynastic preservation a little too seriously for today's times?
No, what I think she took seriously, I mean, she was so much in love with Rajiv, and the tragedy was so big. It totally, put her life in shambles. Suddenly, the very reason why she was in India was questioned. It was an assassination not only of Rajiv, it was the whole family who had been stricken in a very, very tough way. And I think she slowly started to assimilate the idea that she was, in fact, an Indian Bahu, an Indian daughter-in-law, and that she owed her life, she owed her destiny to the family where she was born, where she was married into.
And
So that's an interesting.
And then in that transformation, that sense, more than a sense of destiny, it was more, you know, I'm an Indian because I married Rajiv. What an Indian daughter-in-law would do, she would go for the values, she would still be loyal to the family in which this daughter-in-law had married, and that's what she did.
But she was following the Indian Bahu according to Indira Gandhi and the family around her, whereas many Indian Bahus at that time and today too are rebelling against those kind of rules, as Menika did. So
yes.
she didn't have the confidence of being an Indian girl who would say, I won't do this.
No, but she's not rebellious. She's never been rebellious. I mean, I tell in the book the stories when she was at school. I interviewed her,
she was
her
a
teachers,
good girl.
you know, her teachers and everybody. She was never rebellious. She always has been very docile. She's not that kind of woman.
Okay.
She would accept. She was not a fighter.
Florence, I'll read a passage and I'd like both of you to comment on this, because both of you, both your books in some way are about memory. And you've written that Freud thought that we reinvent our memories throughout our lives. Neuroscience confirms that intuition. What we remember is not the original memory, but the one that it was the last time we thought about it. Memory is an act of the imagination. We recreate the past to better dream of the future. So could you please answer that first, and then Javier, because you've recreated memories of Sonia.
Yeah, I was very interested in this from 2 points of view. The first one is, as you mentioned, the daughter of this woman, Mary's daughter. She wants to find out what this relationship was about. Who was the man? Is he still alive? Could I, learn something about my mother if I go through this as a detective? So in a way, it's a novel, it's a romance, there is philosophy and psychoanalysis, but there's also a sort of detective story. She wants to, and she eventually finds him, but I'm not going to say where and how. So this was one thing. Of course, what she gets is a range of very different narratives of the same story. As you can imagine, the grandmother, Mary's mother, is still very infuriated. So the story she tells is completely different from the students who were in the class with Marie. So she says, wait a minute, where's the truth? What is the truth? Is there a truth? Then she understands that it has to be her own truth, and that it's also the story of a young daughter coming of age and understanding that she has also to have it her own way, just like her mother. And the second reason I was interested in this process of memory was again from the scientific point of view, because what is memory? What does it consist in? And the fact that we don't exactly remember the initial fact, but what we remember is the last memory we had of this initial fact. So we reconstruct the thing all the time.
Maybe embellishing and cutting out bits of the story as it appears. So it's really a part of Rashomon, in the sense that
yeah, actually I had seen this movie before writing the book, and I like it very much.
The memory of, I'm sure when, as you know, that in any incident, if there are 5 people watching it, there'll be 6 versions of, say, an accident or an incident or an event. I'm sure in this we will have 3 or 4 different stories of what happened. Javier, you took on a really difficult task in which that you are writing as if you are sure of what Sonia feels at any given time. That's a big challenge, because if I was Sonia and I was reading it and I'd say, I didn't feel that, I wasn't scared, I wasn't nervous, I wasn't unhappy, she could feel that everything that you have written that she felt is wrong. How did you have that confidence?
I had a confidence because I had made a very, very, very big research. And I put words in her mouth because in this kind of genre, you were not there. So of course you have to make those dialogues are fiction. But that doesn't mean that they're a lie. It means it's fiction based on the documentation that you have gathered. That's the basis on which you can play and make drama out of it. So when there is a book on the Kennedy family, you don't bother about that.
Oh, you do. Norman Mailer was criticized for saying
Norman
how
Mailer
Jack Kennedy felt and how Jacqueline Kennedy felt. He was criticized for it.
Yes, and you can criticize me for that, but you know, when I met Mrs. Gandhi when they gave the Padma Bhushan Award to Dominique Lapierre in a venue, in a social venue at Rashtrapati Bhavan.
Dominique Lapierre is Javier's uncle.
I introduced myself. First, I didn't want her to forget me, so I said, "Madam, there are 4 years I've been sleeping with you," and like she, you know, she felt like I was a guy that had sneaked in from security, you know, a weirdo. And I immediately stopped and said, you know, no, don't worry, I'm just the guy that was writing about you and your family. So I've been obsessed with you for 4 years, and I've been going to sleep and waking every day thinking of you. "Ah, you're the one of the book," she told me. I said, "Yes, madam, and I come to get your blessing. I have the last draft, and I want you to read it. So, you know, you're happy with it. Any changes you want, any comments you would like, your family, whoever, just let me know, so we avoid any problems." And she turned to me and she said, "We never read what's written about us." And that was really the only line I got from her in this whole book. That took me 5 years research. So she had a chance to give that opinion.
But I think
she didn't take it.
She told you a lot by using the royal we.
Yeah, exactly. No, it was a very pompous answer, which struck me because I don't think she's a pompous person at all. But you know, I was nothing for her. She would never have believed I could even finish a book without her help. But you can write. In fact, it's much better to write an unauthorized biography, because what is more boring than an authorized biography?
Florence?
I mean, an authorized biography, it's you know.
I just wanted to say I completely agree with Javier. I myself wrote a biography of the Nobel Prize winner Isaac Bashevis singer. He was dead, so I couldn't interview him. And many of the archives that were in Poland before the Second World War had been destroyed. So I had the facts, not too many facts, and there was room for fiction, invention. And I do agree with you that sometimes fiction makes the reader feel things much better. But it's not one or the other. You can say, these are the facts, and now I'm going to tell you, because I've been working on it so long and I've been really delving into his or her personality, this is my hypothesis. But there are other hypotheses that are also plausible, and then the readers knows. But I think what's important is to draw the line between facts and how you interpret them.
I mean, it's obviously an interpretation of mine, but based a serious one. I mean, I haven't invented characters out of the blue. I mean, I've been, you know, following the closest possible the facts that I had gathered. And if you withdraw imagination from literature, you're killing 10,000 years of literature.
But why did you tread very softly on the Beaufort's issue and her very close connections with Quattrochi, and as well as how he was helped to escape the country, how he was warned that the accounts would be frozen and he cleaned out the accounts the night before, yes, how he was protected in Latin America and Peru where wrong kind of information was sent. So she really exposed herself, if you just list all the activities related to Beaufort and Ottavio.
Well, the two reasons. First of one, after having done this research, I never believed the Gandhis were corrupt people. You might have a friend who's a corrupt guy.
Sorry?
You might have a friend who is a corrupt guy, like Quattrochi. And that can lead you into problems. Just because he's your friend, that doesn't mean that you are part of his business. So I never thought that. I never believed that. I mean, I've seen the house where they lived in Italy. I see the house she sold 5 years ago in her village. These are not people that are, you know, multimillionaires, as they've said. No, no way. And
I think
there is this part, and I've also been criticized by being mellow to Indira Gandhi. But this is a dramatized biography. This is not. I'm not here to judge if the emergency was a good measure or a bad measure. It probably was a very bad measure. But that's not the role of this book. The role of this book is to tell from the inside of that house how a measure like the emergency affected the lives, the personal lives of the people who were living in that house. And the people who were living in that house were a mother-in-law who loved her sister-in-law, a wife who loved her husband and her children, and who thought of going back to Italy for a few days till the storm passes. I mean, I was not, my book didn't, I treated the Beaufort not as an, if I had been an Indian reporter, of course I would have probably gone into the Beaufort scandals in all depth. But, you know, that's not what I was interested in. I was interested
Florence,
in their personal lives.
Florence, you have in the thread of your book, I find that there is an important thread which you say in a line, which is understand how one goes from attachment to detachment. Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, Sonia never underwent that. She never got detached. In her case, it's very difficult because she's still very much in love, but she understands that from a rational point of view, she must get detached to sort of lead a normal life. And again, I'm interested in what happens in the brains, you know, the hormones and the pheromones and all the molecules. It's not at all a scientific book, but it's there because I'm very interested in what is free will. Do we decide? In fact, she never decided that she would fall for, as Sonia never decided that she would fall for Rajiv in Cambridge. It just happened.
Yeah, there is an English saying that says, if you want to make God laugh, tell him your plans. That's about destiny.
So she struggles with this plans, free will, destiny. So that was the first thing that really interested me, because if there is no free will, if it's all in the genes and the DNA and the molecules, then who are we to decide who are the characters? And suddenly it casts a completely different light on literature, the characters, on literature itself. Yes. Mm-hmm. All our heroes or protagonists, maybe they haven't decided anything. Maybe they were just driven by something inside them. So I thought that was absolutely fascinating. And the other thing was, this is free will. The other thing I was interested in was free speech, but maybe we can tackle this.
I think you had more freedom in your book than Javier did, because Javier had to follow, in some sense, facts that happened and incidents that happened, and you couldn't just invent anything. So I think it's tougher to create a book in which you know that there are things which you cannot avoid.
Yeah.
And I think a large part of your book questions, Florence, your book questions middle class morality in every way. And in this, the mother says, I found it reprehensible that he didn't have enough self-control or morals not to go after a young girl, even if she threw herself at him. I don't know how it happened. In any case, a man of honor should not behave like that. For me, it was a scandal, terrible.
Because, sorry
can I just ask you, because from what we have seen in the press, French press, the French are known to be rather liberal with the concept of mistresses, girlfriends, an accepted fact. In fact, in India, most of the time, I would say the Indian press has also stayed away from prime ministers who have had affairs or whatever. It's never been written about, considered that it's their personal lives. But yours addresses a different France, a France where there is this middle class bourgeois mentality. So is it that it is acceptable in some class or areas in France, and it isn't, or what are we talking about here?
What we're talking about is something quite controversial and subversive, which is, as you mentioned, it's this young woman who makes a pass at him. It's not him. He didn't do anything. Maybe he was attracted by her as well, but he didn't say anything. She throws herself at him. And so what is at stake is something like sexual feminine desire among a very young woman. And that is really the heart of the taboo. That's really, that is what embarrassed the mother of the protagonist and some readers as well.
So what you're saying is, that what I asked you was that, is the French culture steeped in these taboos and this kind of morality, or what we see in the liberal where president dies and his mistress is there along with his wife?
Yes, I know
at
what
the
you
funeral.
mean. It's very difficult to draw a general rule because as each culture and country, France is very diverse. So it's true that the media have tended to keep relatively away from private life members of the government, which I think is better than the American and the English press, but now they are tending to do the same and mimic them, which is not particularly nice. And at the same time, there is this, sort of strict, rigid morality, especially among bourgeois families. That's true.
I'm going to use a quote from your book to ask a question of Javier. Florence has written, "This unity of time gave everything a particular relief, an intensity that wouldn't have existed if the time we had together had spread out over a lifetime." So you know what I mean about Sonia having that cloud, potentious cloud that anything can happen to him and their life together would be cut short, which gave a kind of intensity to their relationship. And as gossipy as Delhi political circles are, one thing that was never said was that their marriage was bad.
Their marriage was?
Bad. It was a good marriage.
It was a good marriage.
It was always said that it was a good marriage.
It was an excellent marriage.
Nobody ever gossiped that it was a bad marriage.
And
so do you think that it was also because, besides the fact that Sonia adjusted completely without question, she did put her foot down on many things, of course, as
she did, excuse me, I don't know.
She adjusted without question, but she did put her foot down in some issues, as you have written
one
about
issue
in your book.
was you don't enter politics. And in fact, when she burst into tears in the 5th floor of the All Indian Medical Institute the day Indira was killed, she was waiting for him, and that was told to me by clusters of Congress people that was there also waiting. When Rajiv came that day and he told her, I'll be a prime minister tonight, because the country cannot live with void of power. I have to do it. And then she burst crying because he had broke the vow they had made. And I mean, they were witness to that scene. And I reconstructed it with these witnesses, and also having gone there and tried to know what was the smell, what could you see and everything. But the point, that was a dramatic one, because she knew at that moment, and she told him, you will be killed. I mean, Indira had been just killed, so she saw. That's why it is so dramatic, that story, without adding anything from a writer's point of view, just as it is. As was, for example, Indira's foresightedness in seeing her own death. Indira knew she was going to be killed. She knew it. What she has done in the Golden Temple was too big. She knew they made her pay for that. And in fact, when I interviewed Ashwini Kumar, who then was the head of the police, border police of India, very close friend of Indira, it was Ashwini who had come and told her, please remove those 2 bodyguards because the situation is extremely volatile. The bodyguards, as we all know, were sick. And then her answer was, aren't we secular? Yet she knew she was going to pay a hefty price for having stormed, you know, a sacred shrine. I mean, all those things, I mean, had I invented that, nobody would have believed me. It would have sounded like, you know, a novel out of the blue. But they were real. That's why I'm saying the material of this story was a dreamlike material for a writer.
Javier, you also, I don't want to put you on a spot because it's a book about Sonia, but you did skip over the 84 killings of Sikhs. You didn't cover that much at all, in fact.
Which years you say?
After Indira Gandhi was killed,
yes.
The 1984 massacres of the Sikhs.
I told that story, yes. Yes, when they went ransacking the Sikhs were running for hiding and for, yes, I told about it. I mean, I didn't make a big deal because the book then would have been a 1,000-page book. But I mentioned it, certainly it was a terrible tragedy. I mean, when they stopped those trains and every Sikh there was hunted down and Rajiv was criticized at the beginning not to act tough enough and speedy enough. It is in the book, yeah.
And he famously said
I could have made much more of it, but if you make much more of it, I mean, it's such a long span of time from Nehru to Priyanka Gandhi that, you know, this would have been the first tome. There would have been 10 or 15 more.
What do you think of Rahul Gandhi as a leader at this point?
What do I make of Rahul Gandhi as a leader? Listen, I don't like to respond to that. I'm not Indian. Why should I judge, you know, an Indian leader? The only thing I can say is what I say in my epilogue, which I just revised in this Indian edition. It's a new epilogue, is that the Gandhis have always been late bloomers. Nehru started his career late in life. So did Indira. Sanjay got better towards the end, even though you never know if he would have been really got better. I mean, Rajiv got better towards the end. Sonia was very good at the end. So, you know, I would give Rahul and Priyanka, you know, a shot. They're still young.
We'll end with, Florence, I'll ask you the question that I started the session with of Javier. Why and how did you think of writing this book about this relationship, other than the fact that you wanted to turn it around with Lolita? Was it something that you saw around you in your life? Did something trigger it off?
Yes, something triggered it off. I have 3 daughters, and one of them came back one day from high school and said, you know, this is what happens when student in my class is going out with the philosophy teacher, and they have this age difference, and it's really disgusting.
Okay.
So I said, ah.
I was a philosophy teacher.
You were first. So did you ever experience this kind of situation, and how did you deal with it? Did you write a book, for example?
Oh, you should read the description of the professor. You wouldn't want to be him.
I want to read it, definitely I will read it.
You didn't like him?
Well, the way you described him as moldy, putting off, dirty, clothes of, he doesn't seem like an attractive figure at all.
Anyway, you know what interested me about what you said? She knew from the start that he was going to be killed, and Indira. It's the concept of time, and this is another point that books have in common. She knows Sonia knows Rajiv is going to be killed, and Marie knows that this relationship will have to come to an end. And this makes it completely different, because then you have to live in the present time. There's no past, because they didn't know each other at that time, and there is such a huge difference of age, and there is no future. So it's now or never. And we're not used to live like this in the West. It's not the present time. So this is also an aspect of the story that interested me.
Yeah, which brings us to the question that the intensity of Rajiv and Sonia's relationship was because this thing was hanging over their heads, that it could not last.
There was a little bit of that. The doom, the sense of doom. I mean, and that family had lived long periods of their lives, maybe still they do, with this sense of doom.
Yes.
And that's part of, you know, the epic of the Gandhis.
Should we open it up for questions?
Go ahead.
Javier, hi. My question is for you. I apologize in advance because I have not read your book and maybe you've answered it in the book. But I'm curious as to whether you actually solved the mystery that is Sonia Gandhi. How did she go from being a quiet, docile girl who never spoke to somebody who never let anybody else speak or think for themselves, including her prime minister?
Yeah, well, yeah, but that's in the book. I'm not going to read the book now. It will take, I mean, unless you want to spend 15 hours with me, or 16, I can start reading it. But, I mean, your question is so big that that's what the book is about.
He does kind of
He's trying to explain that transformation, you know. And I'm not a friend of theirs. I mean, it's not, I have no special sympathy for them. And the way they've been treated, even less sympathy. But that doesn't mean that I can be fair in my judgment and the way I see things, you know. But, I mean, it would take really too long to answer your question. It's a book.
But it's very much about the power of attraction.
No. When I was starting the book, you know, when you start a book, like you said before, you always look for, how you say, examples of other books in the literature that could help you out or give you an orientation. You're looking for an archetype. And I was looking for the archetype of somebody who ends up having power without wanting to have power. It doesn't exist in literature. It simply does not exist. Usually you find archetypes that are people wanting and fighting for power, ultimately gaining that power, winning over, and then making a good use or a bad use of that power. And that's what's in literature. There was no archetype of this on the story of Sonia. As I saw it, and as I still see it, and then I really believe it is, you know, a woman that got power in spite of herself, in spite of her inner, you know.
Don't say voice.
Yeah, she was a family woman. She wanted to be restore paintings. At the beginning, she wanted to be an air hostess for Alitalia. I mean, she was not an ambitious woman at all. She's never been ambitious at all. Her ambition has been then diverted toward her family, her in-laws' family, and when it was imbued with a sense of manifest destiny, no? That they were part of a family that somehow was integrated into the history of India. But that doesn't come really from her. She's still a simple woman in that way, you know.
Florence, how would you put this relationship between the student and the professor in terms of exploitation of being in a more powerful position, which is the professor, and having an affair with one of the students? There is this position of a man who's powerful is exploiting his position, exploiting the student because he's in a position, and you know that it is considered in America, definitely it's illegal. You can be fired for having an affair with a student.
I think what's interesting is in her eyes, she becomes more important because she is the one who he's picked. Even if she made the pass at him, she is the one who eventually has this relationship. So it gives her a different status compared to the other students in the class. But also going back to your point, the point you were just making about power, when I was listening to you, I was wondering, do you think that the fact that she was a woman, Sonia, and she wanted to keep far from power because she knew more or less consciously that especially in this part of the world, power and faith or tragedy were extremely intertwined. Do you think the fact that she was a woman, she could feel this differently than a man would have?
No, I don't think it was a problem of being a woman. I think she was
they all
in
felt
love.
it, the whole family today.
I think it's more about love. I mean, she was in love with that man, and when you're in love with somebody at such level, you know, and it was a durable love story. I mean, you're very, you know, you have all your senses extremely awakened to what can happen or to what may happen, you know, and you feel doom. You feel you don't want anything bad happening there. And here they killed the mother-in-law, whom she really adored. They had a very, very good relationship. And then his son is being, you know, dragged into this world. In fact, dragged by their surname, because they were called Gandhis. That's the weight of a name, you know. They dragged them all into a destiny they wouldn't have chosen.
But don't you think a man could have thought, great, I can have love and power. I can have both.
I'm telling you, Rajiv was not crazy for power.
Any more
Maybe
questions?
another one, yes. Not all men are the same.
Yeah.
Good afternoon.
Hi, from what I've read of the book and a fairly large excerpt, it's completely non-controversial. So is the previous government might have banned it, didn't allow it. Is this publicity material or is there something specific that they did? Because, you know, the previous government is not known for banning books like this government is.
Well,
No, I'm sorry, I beg to disagree. The Congress
this was a
Party,
very good question.
Congress Party has banned more books than any other party. All right? So they were the ones to ban Salman Rushdie's book first in the world before it was banned in other countries.
Yes.
So please correct yourself on that. Secondly, I think, Javier, in some sense I do agree with her, that it's really, it makes Sonia look so wonderful. It's a real, none of the really nasty bits that have come up in her life in India have come out.
yes, well, I wanted to make her, it's not wonderful, it's just human. Because the image we had was like a woman, like a piece of marble, like a statue of stone, living in a gilded cage, alien from reality around her. That's the image she's giving. And what I wanted is to go inside that image and to find the humanity in that story, in that person, in that character. That was my main aim. Now the question you just asked made me laugh because it really looks like these Congress guys that, you know, organized this book burning and my image and my effigy burning in front of the Spanish embassy in Delhi and in front of the Spanish consulate in Mumbai, the second week of June 2010, it seems like they were hired by my publisher because they were so good at doing our, you know, the promotion for this book. I would have never have dreamt that they could be so stupid, you know, as to do the very good book promoters. I told my dear friend Pramod Kapoor, my publisher, you should definitely hire Abhishek Banu Singhvi and all these guys there as PR for your publishing house. They're extremely good at that. I don't think they're good at government, but they're good at that. You know.
Yeah.
Hi. The question exactly is about the book. Do you think that if any member from the family, real family, that Sonia Gandhi and the family of Rajiv Gandhi, all that, if any member from that family had helped you or exactly helped you write the book, then your book would have been very different?
Yes, certainly. I mean, at the end, at the beginning, I saw this as an impossible adventure. I said, why will I succeed in a place where everybody else has failed? And still, I was so convinced, as I told you before, of the story that they went on and on and on. And at the end, I was happy that I didn't befriend them, or that they didn't befriend me. Let's say it, let's put it in the right place, no? Because had I become friends with the Gandhis, had I been invited for lunch to attend Yanpat when I'd come to, probably that would have massaged my ego and have been very, very nice, you know, when they were in power. But ultimately they could have used that to completely either make me write the book they would have wanted to write, or convince me not to go ahead. It was so easy to convince someone not to go ahead.
Did you
if
go
they
to...
had not treated me like shit, excuse me, if they would have befriended me, if they would have invited me, if they would have, you know, shown some interest in my previous books on India, if they, then they could have asked me, just please don't do it. We don't like that. And then most probably I would have relinquished. And I would have, but they weren't like that. They were, you know, tough hooligans saying, who's this guy, out?
Mafiosi.
You know, so when you're treated like that in a free country, how do you react? And this is a very good and beautiful ending for a story that for years, you know, I had to be, I had lived, you know, against all, I had made against all odds and against the current. This has been everything from day one. It was done, this book, you know, against everything, even when I wanted to launch it here. And now, finally, 5 years later, we're enjoying this moment, and, you know, I think it's an extremely good ending for a story that at the beginning, you know, I wouldn't have bet 5 rupees that
Javier, I'm being signaled that we have to stop. I want to ask you one last question. 5 years ago, what stopped the publication?
The atmosphere, Abhishek Manu Singhvi and the cronies of Sonia Gandhi created of violence, of threats. They wrote to the publishers all over the world that had published the Red Sari, threatening to force them to withdraw the books from the stands. I mean, they created an atmosphere that, you know, there was no legal action because there was no defamation. I mean, what could have a judge said about this book? You know, I had not invented, you know, hot scenes between Sonia Gandhi and, I don't know, the Dalai Lama. Then you can hit me.
Take that back.
You can take me to court for that. But there was none of this. So they knew there was not a case. So they created an atmosphere to scare away all English language publishers and to scare away all publishers in India also. They scared all of them but Pramod Kapoor, who stuck to it. And for me, you know, I didn't want more problems. I mean, I love this country, I've written 4 books about it, but I don't want to be burned in the streets by some loonies. So.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Please pick up Florence's book, Attachment. I recommend it, and Javier Moro's Red Sari. Thanks very much for being a great audience.